Welcome to another episode of Thoughts on Thriving. And if you're following along in the book, I'm looking at page 4 of the opening chapter now. And this is introducing the idea that thriving is fundamental to life. In fact, thriving defines what life means. It is a natural process. Everything is geared towards greater and greater regeneration, towards greater and greater complexity. And although there is entropy in our natural systems, so things do break down, the miracle of life, if you want to call it that, is that we have found a way to take that energy that dissipates and to restructure it and to reformulate it back into life and into organisms and living systems. So when we say that we must adopt a thriving perspective, that we should bring thriving strategies to our businesses and our governments, this is not a pipe dream. This is simply realigning with what life is built to do. And we need to sometimes step out of the way to stop doing the damage that we've been doing and allow our natural systems to recuperate, to repair, to regenerate, but also to help those systems to recover. And this is the whole idea of rewilding. It's the whole idea of bringing new health to our social systems, helping people to live in a world that's fairer, to address issues of diversity and inclusion, to use our technologies to enable the repair and the reconstruction of our ecological and our social systems. So that's the good news, is that thriving is not something that we have to invent. We can learn from nature. We can be inspired by nature. We sometimes talk about biomimicry or natural intelligence. The work of Janine Benyus and Lean Horrison is great to look at on those subjects. But we can take our inspiration from what nature already does and apply that to our own living systems, to our societies, to our organizations, and to the ecosystems of which we're a part and where we often are invited to be custodians and to bring back the life that we've destroyed. Now, the other thing that I've been reflecting on this week is a report that came out at the World Economic Forum called The Breakthrough Effect. This is based on work of the University of Essex, among others, and it's all about tipping points, which are absolutely fundamental in the pursuit of a thriving future, because tipping points are one of the phenomenon at the heart of rapid change. Change is never linear, and as change accumulates in a system, then we either get breakdown or we get breakthrough, and that is a result of convergence or positive reinforcing feedback loops. And the tipping point is that inflection point where we reach the steep part of the exponential curve of change. And so we can get negative tipping points where things really do fall apart, break down very rapidly, but we can also get positive tipping points. And this report, The Breakthrough Effect, has looked at some of the critical tipping points, especially in relation to climate change and our economy. And one of the things I love about it is that it comes up with 3 super tipping points. These are like a nexus of convergence that's happening in 3 areas that could fundamentally and irrevocably change our world. So it's really interesting and important to know what those super tipping points might be. Let me briefly mention them. The first is a nexus of change that's happening in the area of renewable energy, battery technology, and electric vehicles. These are all reinforcing one another and scaling extremely rapidly, to the extent that they will probably completely change not only our energy and mobility system, but the way that we live and work and travel very rapidly. And so this is one of the biggest changes. In fact, it underlies the entire energy basis, what powers our economy and what helps us to get around in our life and in our work. So look out for that one. It's probably the super tipping point that is most far advanced, and we see it already on the steep part of the curve. It's in acceleration phase. The second super tipping point is to do with converting to green ammonia for use initially in fertilizers, but then also spilling over for use also as green hydrogen in all kinds of industry sectors, because then we're talking about being able to make green steel, to have green shipping, to have green chemical plants. This really has a massive knock-on effect, a positive reinforcement of transformation towards thriving in multiple sectors in our economy. And one of the keys is to ensure that it starts in the agricultural sector by changing the amount of green ammonia that we put into our fertilizers. The third super tipping point is the nexus that we get around the change of our food system. And this is, on the one hand, the strong trend we see towards plant-based foods in alternative to meat, to the livestock industry, which has such a massive, outsized and catastrophic impact on land use, biodiversity loss, and climate change, as well as health. By seeing this acceleration of plant-based diets, that's one part of the tipping point, but it's reinforced by technology breakthroughs in 2 other areas. The area of cultivated meat, so really growing our meat from stem cells, and the other is precision fermentation, also growing our meat alternatives, our alternative protein, in the same way that we might grow the insulin that we use for the treatment of diabetes. That is also receiving huge investments of venture capital, and we start to see it at an early stage of getting onto that acceleration curve. And we foresee, and this report predicts, that this could be one of the 3 next biggest super tipping points that could fundamentally change our world, our society, because of course it's not only what we eat, but more fundamentally how we grow what we eat, and the impact that has on land, on biodiversity, on climate change, and even on our health. So taken together, these three super tipping points are incredibly exciting because they suggest that while we do face potential breakdowns in the system, planetary boundaries that are being exceeded, where we're moving into the danger zone, we also have the possibility and some real evidence of the so while we see that breakdown is absolutely a possibility where we're exceeding those planetary boundaries, we also know that breakthrough is entirely possible, and in fact that it's happening already. In these three areas, if we get this right, if we continue to move strongly in the direction of these three super tipping points, we will change our world forever. We will become fundamentally more sustainable, and we will bring the possibility of a thriving future massively forward. We will bring it within the realms of not only possibility but probability. We will make a thriving future a reality, something that we can implement rather than just dream about.